Good afternoon, my brothers and sisters. This is State Representative Tyrone Brooks, President of the Georgia Association of Black Elected Officials, proudly to announce the 41st Anniversary Commemoration of the Assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s program. The program for Georgia on April 4th of this year, 2009, as it has been for the last 5 years, is to march on the Moores Ford Bridge in Monroe, Georgia, 45 minutes to an hour's drive from downtown Atlanta, headed toward Athens. We march on the Moores Ford Bridge on this day to commemorate the assassination of Dr. King for several reasons. One of the reasons is that we want to say Dr. King, if he were living, would be marching on this bridge and demanding the arrest and prosecution of the killers who still live, who were responsible for the lynching massacre of the Malcoms and the Dorseys on July 25, 1946. This case was on Dr. King's agenda in 1968 as he went back to Memphis, Tennessee to work with the sanitation workers, he and Dr. Ralph David Abernathy. Dr. King was assassinated on April 4, 1968. He never really had a chance to fully get involved in this lynching case, but it was on his agenda because as a 17-year-old student at Morehouse College, Dr. King wrote a letter to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution protesting the massacre of the Malcoms and the Dorseys on the Moores Ford Bridge. He was 17 years old in 1946. So it was on his mind, it was on his agenda. He never had a chance to really get involved in this case. Dr. Ralph David Abernathy did. Abernathy, of course, is Dr. King's best friend in the world and his partner. Abernathy got involved. He led movements in Walton County, Monroe, Georgia. Hosea Williams. We brought Dr. Joe Lowry into it. We brought Senator Charles Steele, our new president of SCLC for the last 5 years, onto it. Reverend James Orange, Rita Samuels, Helen Butler, Walter Butler, Ed Dubose, John Evans. All of our great leaders have been in and out of this. John Lewis, Congressman Lewis, was on the bridge with us a year ago to kick off the march and the other activities that we launch every year. So we are marching on the Moores Ford Bridge to not only call attention to the assassination of Dr. King and to pay tribute to his legacy, but we march on the bridge to demand that the federal and state authorities arrest those killers who are still living. The killers are living. Some of them are alive and well, walking around, driving around as we speak. We want those killers incarcerated in prison. So we're demanding the arrest and prosecution of the killers. What we do on this day is we march on the bridge to call attention to the case, and then we return to First African Baptist Church in Monroe to really have fellowship and food, and we start planning for the reenactment of the lynchings, which is July 25th of every year. The reason this case is so important to us is because it represents the last open public mass lynching in America. On July 25th, 1946, these African Americans, 2 couples and an unborn baby, carried by Miss Dorothy Malcom. She was 7 months pregnant. They were massacred and lynched on this bridge simply because they were black. The Ku Klux Klan and law enforcement, all working together, conspired to commit this horrible, horrible massacre simply because Roger Malcolm, Miss Dorothy's husband, had been in a fight with a white man, Barney Hester, in a little area called Hestertown, right outside of Monroe. They held him in jail for 11 days. Finally, he was bonded out, supposedly to go back to work on the farm. Well, instead of him going back to the farm, he and his wife and another couple, George and Mary Dorsey, were taken to the Moores Ford Bridge. And these 4 people were massacred. Their bodies were shot up, they were beaten, and they were hung in the trees. And the baby carried by Miss Dorothy Malcom was cut out of her. The undertaker who picked the bodies up for burial, Mr. Dan Young, introduced me and Robert Howard to this case in 1968. And it was a shocker because I was only going on 21 years old. I was not 21 yet. And Robert Howard, who lived in Walton County, had been introduced to this case by Mr. Young a year earlier. But it was a shocker to me, and when I told Hosea Williams about it, he said, oh yeah, he said, that's a serious case and it's on Dr. King's agenda. So we carry on the movement that Dr. King would be living today if he were alive, demanding the arrest and prosecution and closure to the last open public mass lynching in the United States of America. And this is Monroe, Georgia, Walton County, between Atlanta and Athens. It's a short little drive from Atlanta to the bridge. So we gather at the First African Baptist Church on the corner of Highway 11 and Tyler Street, right across the street from Church's Chicken in downtown Monroe at 12 noon on April 4th, which is a Saturday this year. And we have a little rally, then we motorcade near the bridge, and from the historic marker at Highway 78 at Laughlin Road, we actually march down the road about 2.5 miles to the bridge, have a rally on the bridge, speakers on the bridge, and then we return to First African Baptist Church for the reception. That's the program. That's the way it flows on this day. So those who are not going to Memphis to the Lorraine Motel events on April 4th, we say your option is to come and be with us in Monroe, Georgia. If you're not going to Memphis, you ought to be in Monroe. So join us 12 noon, First African Baptist Church, Monroe, Georgia, to call attention to this horrible lynching and to pay tribute to the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the day that he was assassinated, April 4th, 1968. If you need more information, please go to GABEO.org. That's GABEO.org. Thank you very much.